So every morning, your phone lights up with breaking news.
Constantly, yeah.
Right. It's like a sudden missile test in some contested strait, or a volatile trade tariff announced overnight, or a diplomatic summit that just suddenly falls apart.
Right, the usual chaos.
Exactly. And we're constantly told by the media that this is, history happening in real time, that you need to pay attention right now because this specific crisis is reshaping the world order.
Yeah, that it's the most important thing ever.
But the script we're diving into today, from a show called Strategic Vanguard, it basically argues that you actually being completely blinded by the noise.
Completely blinded, yeah.
So today we are looking at this massive hidden disconnect between today's headlines and how global superpowers are actually building the next 50 years of history entirely in the shadows.
Yeah, and I mean, it is arguably the most critical disconnect for anyone trying to understand global markets or geopolitics.
Right.
Because the greatest powers on Earth, they simply do not process the world through 24-hour news cycles. They just don't.
They're on a totally different wavelength.
Exactly. They are operating on a completely different temporal plane. They determine what the geopolitical map needs to look like in 10, 20, or even 50 years.
Wow, 50 years?
Yeah. And every action taken today, even the ones that appear contradictory or, minor on the surface, it's all a calculated mechanical step toward that highly specific future state.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission for this deep dive is to basically give you, the listener, a shortcut to thinking like a grand strategist.
I love that. Yes.
We want to hand you an analytical framework so you can cut through the superficial friction of the daily news cycle and actually map out the decades-long currents that dictate global power.
Right. Getting past the static.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the core premise here in the Strategic Vanguard script is that nations shaping history do not build their foundation on the present moment.
No, they definitely don't.
So let's look at the mechanics of why that is. I mean, why is there such a vast canyon between how a superpower plans and how the rest of the world operates?
Well, it fundamentally comes down to structural incentives and the timeline of survival.
Okay.
If you look at the architecture of our daily lives, I mean, politicians, by institutional design, are anchored to the next election cycle.
They'll have to get reelected.
Exactly. They have to demonstrate tangible, highly visible results in, 24 to 48 months?
Yeah, usually.
And corporate executives, they're often tethered to the quarterly earnings report. They are structurally mandated to deliver immediate shareholder value.
Or they're out.
Right. And then you have the media apparatus, which is built entirely around daily, if not hourly, engagement metrics.
Just constant refresh.
Yeah. The structural incentive for almost every major player in our society is short-term survival.
So everyone is basically incentivized to play a tactical game rather than a strategic one.
Precisely.
If tactics are about answering, how do we win today's battle? Or how do we secure this quarter's profits? Then grand strategy is trying to answer a much heavier question.
Right.
Like, how do we architect a system where we inevitably achieve our national objectives over the next half century?
Yes, that's the real question.
It makes me think of like playing poker. Tactics are like trying to win a single hand of poker. But strategy is figuring out how to eventually own the casino.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Right, because grand strategy isn't about winning the hand. It's figuring out how to systematically acquire the casino itself, so that no matter who wins the individual hands, a percentage of every pot flows back to you.
Yeah, that distinction between the hand and the casino is exactly how military and economic planners are trained to view conflicts.
But wait, isn't winning today's battle a basic requirement just to survive until tomorrow? I mean, if you bankrupt your country fighting a tactical border war today, there is no casino tomorrow.
That's a very fair point.
So doesn't short-term tactical survival always have to trump long-term strategic planning, just as a matter of physics?
It seems like it should, but what's fascinating here is that history provides a stark counter-narrative.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The historical record is littered with brilliant tactical victories that ultimately triggered massive strategic failures.
Just because they didn't have an end goal.
Exactly. Because they lacked a long-term end state. Winning a battle doesn't organically secure a war, and winning a war certainly doesn't architect a lasting, favorable peace. If a state focuses entirely on surviving today's crisis, they will almost always expend finite resources or make structural compromises that actively destroy their leverage for the next decade.
They burn the furniture to keep the house warm.
Basically, yeah. Serious planners never start with today's crisis. They start with the desired end state.
Reverse engineering.
Exactly. They define the geopolitical environment they require 50 years out, and they reverse engineer the required economic, military, and diplomatic milestones to reach it.
Man, reverse engineering foreign policy is such a fascinating framework. And it highlights a concept from the source material that completely changes how you look at the world map.
Oh, for sure.
Because if true strategy requires reverse engineering from decades in the future, time itself stops being a passive measurement. Time basically becomes an active, offensive weapon.
It does. Time is the ultimate silent weapon, and it is arguably the most difficult one to defend against.
Because you can't see it.
Exactly.
Right.
We typically measure national power through kinetic events, the unveiling of a hypersonic missile or a sweeping international treaty.
Right, the flashy stuff.
But true, unshakable structural power is built through the compounding interest of patience.
Patience is power. I like that.
Yeah. A state utilizing time as a weapon spends decades quietly building end-to-end domestic industries. They fund foundational technologies that won't see commercial viability for 30 years.
Wow, 30 years.
Yeah. They modernize military logistics not for today's conflict, but for the battlefield of 2050. And they systematically embed their diplomatic influence into the bureaucracies of developing nations.
Here's where it gets really interesting, just marveling at this idea of time as a stealth mechanism.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of refreshing for you as a listener, right? If you're overwhelmed by info overload, the loudest news is rarely the most important news.
It almost never is.
Because the most dangerous part of this weapon is its invisibility. Like a state incrementally increasing its domestic semiconductor manufacturing capacity by 2% a year. That is never going to generate a breaking news banner on cable television.
No, it's way too boring for TV.
Right. Or slowly monopolizing a raw material supply chain over 15 years. But if you map out that investment over time, it acts exactly like an index fund.
Exactly like an index fund, yeah.
A fractional advantage in critical technology in 1990 compounds into an unbreakable hegemonic monopoly by 2025.
Which is exactly why patience allows for the compounding of national capabilities over time.
It's all about compound.
Yeah, and that is something a reactive nation simply cannot replicate. A government that consistently funds basic scientific research for 50 straight years hasn't just bought a few technological breakthroughs.
Right, they've changed everything.
They have terraformed their economy. They have created a self-sustaining ecosystem of innovation.
So a reactive nation just can't catch up.
Well, a reactive nation suddenly realizing they are behind in a critical sector cannot simply replicate that ecosystem by throwing $1 trillion at the problem in a panic.
Right, because you can't buy time.
Exactly. The intellectual capital, the supply chains, the institutional knowledge, those require the one resource a reactive nation cannot buy: time. Strategic competition is less about dramatic moments and more about consistent progress.
Okay, so if we look at how this plays out in the real world, we move from the concept to the concrete reality of the biggest players.
Right.
The source material spends a lot of time dissecting concrete case studies, starting with China. And looking at this strictly neutrally, whether you agree or disagree with Beijing's policies, their execution of a multi-decade plan is highly visible.
Oh, it's a textbook application of time as a strategic asset. The sequence of their development wasn't reactive at all.
It was planned.
Yes. The initial domestic economic reforms of the late 20th century provided the capital for massive internal infrastructure.
Right, all the roads and high-speed rail.
Exactly. And that infrastructure provided the logistical base to become the world's manufacturing hub.
Okay.
Then, that manufacturing dominance provided the leverage for highly targeted technological investments.
Which then funds the next phase.
Right, which in turn funded the modernization of a blue water navy and sweeping global connectivity projects.
It's just step after step. You look at something like securing critical mineral supply chains, right?
Yeah.
The quiet acquisition of mining rights for cobalt or lithium in Africa and South America over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
That wasn't about dominating the news cycle in 2005.
No.
It was a structural lock-in. By the time the global economy realized electric vehicles and advanced batteries were the future, the supply chain was already owned and routed.
They already held all the cards.
Exactly. That isn't just a series of successful trade deals. It is a meticulously engineered strategic trap that took decades to spring.
And it proves how sustained national objectives, insulated from the friction of daily politics, literally reshape global power dynamics.
So what does this all mean for the U.S.? Because the source material also heavily analyzes the United States.
Right, as another prime example of the long view.
Right, building global alliance networks, entrenching the dollar, cultivating elite research universities over generations.
Yes.
But I've got a specific pushback here. From the outside, U.S. politics often looks incredibly fractured and reactive, from administration to administration.
Oh, it certainly does.
It's wild. It's highly polarized. The whole federal apparatus basically reboots every 4 to 8 years.
Yeah.
How is there actually continuity? How does a system designed to be that fractured maintain the 50-year focus required to use time as a weapon?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to separate the political theater from the institutional reality.
Okay, separate the theater from reality.
Right. The political surface of the United States is intentionally loud and reactive. But beneath those loud surface-level political changes, the bedrock institutions maintain a steady trajectory.
Like what kind of institutions?
Well, consider the financial architecture of the U.S. dollar. Decades ago, the U.S. systematically pegged global energy trade to the dollar.
Right, the petrodollar.
Exactly. They weren't just winning a contemporary economic argument, they were building a structural reality. So now, even if a foreign nation fundamentally opposes U.S. policy today, they are forced to hold and trade in U.S. currency just to keep their domestic economy functioning.
Oh, wow. So the politicians are just like the surface weather, but the institutions, the central bank, the military commands, the university research pipelines, they are the underlying climate.
That's a great analogy.
The weather changes every day,
Yeah.
but the climate dictates the ecosystem.
Precisely. Take military alliances, right? NATO or bilateral defense pacts.
Okay.
These aren't just pieces of paper signed by one administration. They are interoperability traps.
Interoperability trap.
Yeah. When an allied nation integrates U.S. defense technology, say, the F-35 fighter jet into their military, they are locking themselves into U.S. logistics chains.
Oh, I see.
They're locked into U.S. software updates and U.S. pilot training for the next 40 years.
Because they can't just switch to another plane overnight.
Exactly. Individual U.S. administrations change and policies evolve, but those core strategic interests continue across decades. That continuity is the defining characteristic of a major power.
So we see how established powers use time, but what about a rising power trying to make this exact strategic leap right now?
That is where it gets really complicated.
Because the sources highlight India as the crucial contemporary test case.
Yes, absolutely.
They're essentially trying to lay the tracks for a 50-year strategy while the train of daily politics is already moving at full speed.
And India represents a fascinating, incredibly complex geopolitical crossroads.
Yeah.
Because they have the demographic weight and the economic potential to become a central pillar of the 21st century.
Right, 1.4 billion people.
But the critical question is whether a sprawling, extraordinarily diverse federal democracy can think beyond immediate political debates to build long-term capabilities.
Because the source material lists a staggering array of structural investments India needs to make, right?
A massive list.
They need overhauls to physical infrastructure, they need advanced domestic manufacturing, a blue water navy, critical tech like space and AI, and higher education.
It's everything all at once.
And mechanically, none of those will yield immediate returns. It's like planting a massive forest knowing you won't be around to sit in the shade.
Yeah.
So given how noisy modern political debates are, how difficult is it for a country like India to maintain focus on investments that won't pay off for decades?
It is the single most difficult maneuver in geopolitics.
Really?
Yes. This is the literal tipping point between remaining a reactive participant on the world stage and rising to shape the global order.
Because the pressure to just spend money on today's problems must be huge.
Immense. A developing democracy faces incredible pressure to deploy capital toward immediate voter relief, domestic subsidies, and localized infrastructure.
Right. Keeping the lights on today.
Exactly. Diverting hundreds of billions of dollars toward deep water submarines or quantum computing research, that requires a national consensus that completely transcends partisan politics.
Because if a new administration comes in 5 years later and says, we're scrapping the semiconductor initiative to fund a short-term tax cut, then the compounding interest drops back to zero.
Yes.
You lose the time weapon entirely.
Exactly. For a rising power like India, these investments will dictate their global position decades from now. If they get bogged down in tactical, short-term infighting, they simply will not harness the timeline necessary to compete structurally with established superpowers.
Man, which really brings us back to the trap we all fall into, right?
Right.
From individual voters right up to heads of state. The illusion of the headline.
The illusion of the headline, yes.
If this kind of methodical, long-term institution building is the proven path to power, why are we and the media so easily distracted by short-term drama?
Because short-term drama is deeply emotional and it's highly visible.
It gets clicks.
Right, it's easily commodified. Headlines magnify today's events while completely hiding the deeper trends.
Yeah.
You know, a one-week diplomatic dispute over a border crossing will dominate global television. Pundits debate it. Algorithms amplify the outrage.
And the markets freak out.
Right. But meanwhile, entirely out of the spotlight, another country is quietly changing the balance of power. They're rewriting international technical standards or quietly dominating a new supply chain.
Headlines do not create change. Long-term strategy does.
Exactly. The historical lesson here is clear. Empires rise through sustained institution building and patience.
And they fall when they lose that patience.
Yes. They decline when short-term political decisions replace long-term strategic vision. While military, economic, and technological strength matter, of course they do, clarity of purpose matters most.
Clarity of purpose, that is so empowering to realize, especially for you listening, right?
It really is.
You don't need to panic over every push notification on your phone. The loudest news isn't the real story.
Right, and this raises an important question for all of us. How should we, as consumers of information, adapt?
Right, what's the takeaway?
We must learn to look past the illusion of the headline to spot the quiet structural changes happening in the background. That's where the real game is being played.
So, to summarize the main takeaway here, the world's greatest powers aren't built in a news cycle.
No, they are not.
They're built through disciplined choices, patient investment, and a long-term vision.
Absolutely. So next time you read the news, don't just ask what happened today. Ask yourself, what trend is unfolding over the next 20 years? That is the new lens for viewing the world.
Such a great way to frame it. But here is a final, brand new, provocative thought for you to chew on long after this deep dive ends, kind of building on all these sources.
Okay, let's hear it.
The source material proves that time is a strategic weapon, right? And great powers plan 50 years ahead.
Right.
But what happens when the pace of technological change, like, the sudden explosion of artificial intelligence or rapid shifts in global climate, starts moving faster than a nation's ability to plan?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Can a great power still rely on a meticulous 50-year strategy when the fundamental rules of the world might completely rewrite themselves in just 5?
That is a terrifying question.
Right. When tech moves that fast, does grand strategy still even work? Something to think about. Keep your eyes on the horizon, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.